Princess Isabella stood by the tall windows of her castle bedroom, watching the morning sun paint the kingdom of Valdoria in golden light. At 25, she had always felt different from her royal family, but she could never understand why. Her dark hair and green eyes stood out against her parents' blonde hair and blue eyes. Her love for books and science seemed strange in a family known for their military traditions. The princess had recently returned from university in England, where she studied genetics and biology. Her professors had talked about DNA testing and how it could reveal family histories that people never knew existed. The idea fascinated her, but she never thought she would need such a test herself. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday morning when she was cleaning out her late grandmother's room. Queen Helena had passed away 6 months ago, and Isabella was finally ready to go through her belongings. Hidden behind old jewelry boxes, she found a small wooden chest that she had never seen before. Inside the chest were letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The letters were addressed to her grandmother, but they were signed with a name she did not recognize. Your loving sister, Margaret. This confused Isabella greatly because her grandmother had always told everyone she was an only child. The royal family records showed no mention of any sisters. Isabella sat on the dusty floor and read through the letters carefully. They spoke of a separation that happened many years ago, of a family torn apart by war and politics. Margaret wrote about missing her sister and hoping they could meet again someday. The letters mentioned children and grandchildren that Queen Helena had never met. The last letter was different from the others. It was shorter and sadder. Margaret wrote that she was dying and would never see her sister again. She begged Helena to tell the truth about their family to the next generation. She wanted the children to know about their real heritage. Isabella's hands shook as she read these words. What truth was Margaret talking about? What heritage was hidden from them? The princess felt like her whole life had been built on lies, but she did not know which parts were false. That evening, Isabella could not eat her dinner. She sat at the long dining table with her parents, King Richard and Queen Elena, but her mind was somewhere else. She watched their faces carefully, looking for any signs that they knew about the secret letters. They seemed normal, talking about their daily royal duties and upcoming events. Isabella, you seem quiet tonight, her father said, cutting into his roast beef. Is everything all right? I'm fine, Father, she replied, forcing a smile. Just tired from organizing grandmother's things. Her mother's fork paused in the air. You don't have to do that alone, dear. The servants can help you. No, I want to do it myself, Isabella said firmly. It feels important to handle her personal things with care. Queen Elena nodded but said nothing more. Isabella noticed that her mother avoided looking at her directly for the rest of the meal. After dinner, Isabella went to her room and searched online for DNA testing companies. She had learned about them in university but never thought she would use one. The websites explained how a simple test could reveal family connections, ethnic background, and genetic health information. She ordered a test kit to be delivered to a private address outside the castle. She could not risk having it sent to the palace where others might see it. The waiting was difficult, but she knew she needed answers about her family's real history. A week later, Isabella secretly met with her trusted friend Sarah, who worked in the village, to collect the DNA test kit. Sarah was the only person who knew about Isabella's investigation into her family's past. Are you sure you want to do this? Sarah asked as they sat in a small cafe away from the castle. Sometimes it's better not to know certain things. Isabella held the small box in her hands. I have to know, Sarah. These letters suggest that everything I've been told about my family might be wrong. I need to understand who I really am. What if the results show something that changes everything? Sarah worried. What if it affects your position as princess? Isabella had thought about this many times. The royal succession laws were clear. Only legitimate heirs could inherit the throne. If she discovered that she was not truly the king and queen's daughter, it could destroy her entire future. But the need to know the truth was stronger than her fear. "Then I'll deal with whatever comes," she said with determination. "I can't keep living with these questions in my head." That night, Isabella followed the test instructions carefully. She collected her saliva sample in the small tube and sealed it according to the directions. She planned to send it the next day when she went to visit the children's hospital in the village, a regular royal duty that would give her a good reason to leave the castle. As she lay in her bed that night, Isabella stared at the ceiling and wondered what the results would show. Would they confirm that King Richard and Queen Elena were her biological parents? Would they reveal unknown relatives like the mysterious Margaret mentioned in the letters? Or would they uncover something even more shocking about her true identity? The princess had always felt like she was different, but she had never questioned whether she truly belonged in the royal family. Now, holding those letters and the DNA test kit, she realized that her entire life might be about to change. She was both excited and terrified to learn what secrets her family had been keeping from her all these years. Sleep did not come easily that night as Isabella's mind raced with possibilities and fears about what the truth might reveal. 3 weeks after sending her DNA sample, Isabella received an email notification that her results were ready. She was in the castle library when the message appeared on her phone, and her heart immediately began racing. She looked around to make sure no one was watching, then quietly left the room and went to her private study. With trembling fingers, she logged into the DNA testing website and clicked on her results. The first page showed her ethnic background, mostly European, which was expected for someone from the royal family of Valdoria. But as she scrolled down to the family matches section, her blood turned cold. The website had found several close DNA matches, but none of them were King Richard or Queen Elena. This was impossible. Both her parents had royal bloodlines that were well documented for centuries. Yet the scientific evidence clearly showed that neither of them were her biological parents. Isabella's hands shook as she continued reading. Her closest DNA match was listed as Margaret Thompson, first cousin. The name Margaret made her heart skip a beat. This had to be connected to the woman who wrote letters to her grandmother. But the test results showed Margaret as her cousin, not her great-aunt, as the family tree should indicate. She clicked on Margaret's profile and saw a message waiting for her. With great hesitation, she opened it. "Dear unknown cousin, I was shocked to see you as a close DNA match. My mother passed away last year, but before she died, she told me incredible stories about her sister Helena, who became a queen. She said Helena had to give up a baby many years ago because of royal protocols and political pressure. Could you possibly be that child? I have been searching for family connections for years. Please contact me if you want to know more about our shared history. Margaret Thompson." Isabella read the message 3 times, each word hitting her like a physical blow. According to Margaret's account, Queen Helena, her grandmother, was actually her biological mother. This meant that King Richard and Queen Elena had raised her as their own daughter, but they were actually her uncle and aunt. The princess felt dizzy and had to sit down in her chair. Everything about her life suddenly made sense. Why she looked different from her parents, why she had different interests and abilities, why she sometimes felt like an outsider in her own family. She was not their daughter at all, but their niece, raised as their child to protect some royal secret. Isabella immediately typed a response to Margaret. "Yes, I believe I am the person you're looking for. Can we arrange a private phone call today? This is extremely urgent and sensitive." Within an hour, Margaret called her using a secure number that Isabella provided. Margaret's voice was warm and kind, reminding Isabella strongly of her grandmother Helena. "I cannot believe I'm actually talking to you," Margaret said with excitement. "My mother talked about you until the day she died. She regretted giving you up every single day of her life." "Please tell me everything," Isabella begged. I need to know the truth about what happened." Margaret explained that Queen Helena had fallen in love with a commoner when she was young, before her arranged marriage to the king. When Helena became pregnant, the royal court was furious. They threatened to remove her from succession if the scandal became public. "The royal advisors gave her two choices," Margaret continued: "give up the baby and never speak of it again, or lose her royal title and be banished from the kingdom forever. Your grandmother was only 18 years old and terrified. She made the hardest decision of her life." Isabella learned that Helena had secretly given birth to her in a private clinic outside the kingdom. King Richard and Queen Eleanor, who had been trying to have children for several years without success, agreed to raise the baby as their own. The official story was that Elena had given birth during a private medical retreat, and only a few trusted people knew the real truth. "Helena never got over losing you," Margaret said sadly. "She wrote me letters for decades, talking about watching you grow up and wishing she could tell you who she really was. She loved you more than anything in the world, but she was trapped by royal duty and fear." Isabella felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to this story. Her beloved grandmother, who had spent countless hours with her reading books and teaching her about science, had actually been her mother all along. Helena had hidden her true feelings behind the role of a loving grandmother, never able to openly claim her daughter. "What about my biological father?" Isabella asked through her tears. Margaret's voice became softer. "His name was James Mitchell. He was a university professor who taught literature. Helena met him when she was taking private lessons to improve her education. They fell deeply in love, but he was considered completely unsuitable for a future queen." "Is he still alive?" Isabella whispered. "Yes, he is. He lives quietly in Scotland now, retired from teaching. He never married and never had other children. Helena told my mother that he never stopped loving her, even after she married the king." Isabella felt overwhelmed by these revelations. Not only had she discovered that her grandmother was her mother, but she also learned that her biological father was alive and had spent his entire life loving the woman he could never be with. "There's something else you should know," Margaret added carefully. "According to the law, this information could affect your royal status. If it became public knowledge that you're not King Richard's biological daughter, some people might question your right to inherit the throne." Isabella had already thought about this terrifying possibility. The succession laws were ancient and complex, but they generally required legitimate blood relationships to the royal line. Since King Richard was Helena's brother, she was still technically royal blood. But illegitimate children had faced challenges to their inheritance rights throughout history. That evening, Isabella could barely function during dinner with her parents. Every time she looked at King Richard and Queen Elena, she saw the truth in their faces. They had kept this massive secret from her for 25 years, allowing her to live a lie while they pretended to be her biological parents. "You seem upset tonight, Isabella," Queen Elena observed. "Did something happen today?" Isabella almost laughed at the irony of the question. Instead, she said, "I've been thinking a lot about grandmother lately. I miss her wisdom and guidance." King Richard's face showed a flash of something. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. "She was a remarkable woman," he said quietly. "She made many difficult sacrifices for the good of the kingdom." The way he said this made Isabella wonder if he was trying to send her a hidden message. Did he suspect that she had discovered the truth? Were there other family members who knew about the secret of her birth? After dinner, Isabella locked herself in her room and cried for hours. She felt angry, confused, and heartbroken all at the same time. The people she had called mother and father her entire life had lied to her about the most basic facts of her existence. Her real mother had died without ever being able to publicly acknowledge her, and her biological father was living alone, probably still grieving for the love he had lost. Isabella realized that she was now facing the biggest decision of her life. Should she confront King Richard and Queen Elena with what she had learned? Should she try to contact her biological father? Should she keep the secret to protect the royal family's reputation? Or should she demand that the truth be revealed to the kingdom? The weight of these questions felt crushing. Everything she thought she knew about herself and her family had been turned upside down in a single day. The DNA test had answered some questions, but it had created many new ones that seemed even more difficult to resolve. As she sat in her darkened room, Isabella understood that there was no going back to her old life. The truth about her birth would change everything, whether she chose to act on it or not. For 3 days after learning the truth about her birth, Isabella could barely eat or sleep. She spent hours walking through the castle gardens, trying to decide what to do with the devastating information she had discovered. Every time she saw King Richard or Queen Elena, she felt like she was looking at strangers who had stolen her entire identity. On Friday morning, Isabella made her decision. She could not continue living this lie any longer. She asked to meet with her parents privately in the king's study, claiming she had important family matters to discuss. Both of them seemed nervous when she made this request, as if they suspected something was coming. When the three of them were alone in the study, Isabella placed the DNA test results on the desk between them. King Richard's face went completely white when he saw the papers, and Queen Elena immediately began crying. "How long have you known?" King Richard asked quietly, his voice shaking. "I've known the truth for 3 days," Isabella replied, trying to keep her own voice steady. "But I should have known my entire life. How could you keep this secret from me for 25 years? Queen Elena sobbed into her hands. "We wanted to tell you so many times, Isabella, but Helena begged us never to reveal the truth. She was terrified that it would destroy your future and bring shame to the royal family." "My grandmother was my mother," Isabella said, still struggling to accept this reality. "She held this secret inside her heart until the day she died. Do you have any idea how much pain that must have caused her?" King Richard stood up and walked to the window, unable to meet Isabella's eyes. "Helena was barely 18 when she became pregnant," he said sadly. "The royal advisors told her that revealing the truth would cause a constitutional crisis. The people expected their future queen to be pure and follow proper royal protocols. So instead, you all decided to build my entire life on a lie," Isabella said angrily. "You let me believe that I was your daughter, while my real mother watched me grow up in silence, pretending to be just my grandmother." "Helena loved you more than her own life," Queen Elena said through her tears. "Every moment she spent with you was precious to her. She used to tell me that being your grandmother was both the greatest joy and the greatest torture she had ever experienced." Isabella felt her anger mixing with overwhelming sadness. She could imagine how difficult it must have been for Helena to hide her true feelings while watching her daughter from a distance. "What about my biological father?" Isabella demanded. "Does he know about me?" King Richard turned back to face her. "James knows that Helena had a baby, but he was told that the child was adopted by a family outside the kingdom. He doesn't know that you are his daughter or that you became a princess. Helena thought it would be too dangerous for him to know your true identity. He spent his entire life not knowing he had a daughter," Isabella said, feeling heartbroken for this man she had never met. "He could have been part of my life, but instead, he's been completely alone. Isabella, you have to understand the impossible position we were all in," Queen Elena pleaded. "If the truth had come out when you were born, it would have destroyed Helena's reign and possibly ended the monarchy itself. We did what we thought was best for everyone. Best for everyone except me and my real parents," Isabella shot back. "You stole my true identity and forced 3 people to live with terrible lies for decades." Isabella sat down heavily in one of the study chairs, feeling exhausted by the emotional weight of this conversation. She looked at the people she had called her parents and realized that despite their lies, they had genuinely loved and cared for her throughout her life. "Do you really love me as your daughter?" she asked quietly. "Or have you always seen me as Helena's child that you were forced to raise?" Both King Richard and Queen Elena immediately moved closer to her chair. "Isabella, you are our daughter in every way that matters," Queen Elena said firmly. "Biology doesn't change the fact that we have loved you and raised you since you were a newborn baby. You are the most important thing in our lives." "We never once thought of you as anything other than our beloved daughter," King Richard added. "The circumstances of your birth don't change the fact that you are our child and our heir." Isabella felt some of her anger beginning to soften, but she was still deeply hurt by the deception. "What happens now?" she asked. "Do I have any legal right to the throne if I'm not your biological daughter?" King Richard consulted with the royal legal advisors that afternoon, and they confirmed what Isabella had feared. According to the strict interpretation of succession laws, her position as heir could potentially be challenged if her true parentage became public knowledge. However, since she was still Helena's daughter, and Helena had been the legitimate queen, she maintained royal blood rights through her mother's line. "The legal situation is complicated," the chief advisor explained to Isabella. "Your legitimacy could be questioned, but you would not automatically lose your inheritance rights. Much would depend on public opinion and political support." That evening, Isabella made another difficult decision. She asked Margaret Thompson to arrange a phone call with her biological father, James Mitchell. She felt that she needed to speak with him before deciding how to handle the public aspects of her discovery. When James answered the phone, Isabella's heart broke at the sound of his voice. He sounded older and sadder than she had expected, but also kind and intelligent. "Professor Mitchell, my name is Isabella," she began carefully. "I believe you once knew my mother, Queen Helena." There was a long silence on the phone before James spoke. "Helena," he whispered, and Isabella could hear decades of pain and love in that single word. Is she well?" Isabella had to tell him that Helena had passed away 6 months ago. James cried openly when he heard this news, and Isabella found herself crying with him for the woman they had both loved in different ways. "She never stopped loving you," Isabella told him gently. "I found letters that she wrote, and it was clear that losing you was one of her greatest regrets." "I never stopped loving her either," James replied. "Not for a single day in 47 years. But I always hoped she was happy with her royal life and family." Isabella took a deep breath and decided to tell him the complete truth. "Professor Mitchell, there's something else you need to know. Helena and you had a daughter together. I am that daughter." The silence that followed seemed to last forever. When James finally spoke, his voice was filled with wonder and disbelief. "You're my daughter? Helena's daughter? But I was told." "The royal family lied to everyone, including you," Isabella explained. "They raised me as the king and queen's daughter to protect the monarchy's reputation. But I've discovered the truth through DNA testing." James wept with joy and sorrow at the same time. He had missed 25 years of his daughter's life. But he was overwhelmed with happiness to learn that Helena's child had survived and thrived. Over the following weeks, Isabella secretly met with James several times. They discovered that they shared many interests and personality traits. He was brilliant, kind, and gentle, everything she had hoped her biological father would be. James showed her photos of Helena from their time together, and Isabella finally understood why her grandmother had looked at her with such special tenderness. After much consideration and discussion with both sets of parents, Isabella decided not to make her true parentage public. The risk to the monarchy's stability was too great, and she realized that the legal and political complications could harm the kingdom she loved. Instead, she chose to honor her discovery in private ways. She arranged for James to receive an anonymous royal pension, ensuring he would be financially secure for the rest of his life. She also established a scholarship in Queen Helena's name for young women studying science and literature, the fields that had connected all three of them. Isabella remained the crown princess, but her understanding of her role and responsibilities had changed completely. She knew that she represented not just the official royal bloodline, but also the common people through her biological father's heritage. This gave her a deeper connection to all the citizens of Valdoria. She also developed a closer relationship with King Richard and Queen Eleanor, who were relieved that she had chosen to forgive them and keep the family secret. They began talking more openly about Helena's life and struggles, and Isabella gained a better understanding of the impossible choices that royal duty sometimes demanded. Most importantly, Isabella felt that she finally knew who she truly was. The DNA test had revealed not just biological facts, but emotional truths about love, sacrifice, and family loyalty that were more complex than she had ever imagined. She carried the love of two sets of parents, those who had raised her and those who had created her, and she was determined to honor both legacies in her future reign. Sometimes she still felt sad about the years of secrecy and the relationships that had been lost to royal protocol. But she also felt grateful for the love she had received from multiple families, and she was committed to ruling with the wisdom, compassion, and strength that all her parents had tried to teach her in their own ways.